Chen-Ho-Suk shouldered his sniper rifle and peered through the mist that coiled between the mausoleums and the tombstones. Just hours ago, 10 bodies had been laid to rest here, in the catacombs beneath the church, and the Ten Thunders had it on good authority that Seamus himself was on his way to claim the corpses. Chen smiled to himself as he emerged from the shadows and placed a tightly wrapped bundle of dynamite behind a granite slab. Stealing the explosives from the M&SU had been easy. Getting all 5 charges in the right position to seal the catacombs would be hard, but Master Yamaziko said it was worth it. The prospect of 10 more soldiers in the Mad Hatter's army was more frightening than a midnight mission in the boneyard. As Suk twisted the paper fuse and inserted it into the end of the charge, a low moan from the depths of the fog caught his attention. There, from behind an ornate rose-covered crypt, launched an impossibly tall figure. He was dressed in a suit and tie, but his body was too tall for his clothes, too tall for his bones. His wrists dangled well below his hips, and from his right hand there hung a noose. Suk ducked behind the headstone, but not before catching a glimpse of the man's companions, a grotesque menagerie of animated corpses, the nearest floating a full 6 feet off the ground, strapped to a glowing and arcing electric chair. Across the battlefield, Yamaziko spotted Montressor before her companions did. She sent the lone Torakage around a small structure to drop his dynamite, hoping that the masked warrior's speed would save him from the horrors that lurked in the mist. To her dismay, a hanged man, noose borne aloft by some unseen force, floated around the side of the building to meet him, carried on an ice-cold wind. She heard horrifying whispers, secrets held by the dead, and the two disappeared from her view. She had other things to worry about. She advanced up the field, side by side with her lieutenant, a Katanaga crime boss named Hung, to meet Montressor and a bloated, waterlogged corpse wrapped in heavy chains. The drowned man was well out of range, but Montressor made a clumsy gesture and the corpse lurched forward, animated by some supernatural force. From his vantage point, Suk saw the corpse in the electric chair drop something on the ground, a small wrapped bundle with a long fuse. Were they dropping explosives of their own? Across the cemetery, he saw the Torakage take a wild swing at the hanged man, his weapon raking the apparition's chest before vaulting to safety. But then, as though possessed, the Torakage's body went rigid and he stumbled back toward the hanged. The dangling corpse barely reacted and dropped a bundle of his own, just at the base of the crypt. What were they up to? Yamaziko sidestepped the drowned man, nimbly dancing around the side of the crypt, and dropped one of her explosives. The corpse, as though he had been reminded of his purpose, dropped a bundle as well, then opened his mouth wide and vomited a torrent of seawater and bile at Yamaziko, who ducked at the last minute to watch it splatter on the wall. Boss Hung charged towards the corpse in the chair, slashing at it with his nagamaki, but failed to bring it to the ground. Montressor seemed not to notice the mayhem around him, and steadily plodded forward before swinging his noose and tossing it toward Yamaziko, who batted the thick rope aside with her yari. Trembling, Suk took a step into position, raised his rifle, and took a shot at the glowing corpse that was engaged with Hung. The shot went left, glancing off a tombstone and spraying fragments of granite around the two combatants. Cursing, he shot twice more, but both shots went wild. Suk hoped Yamaziko was too distracted to see his failure. Yamaziko's anger was the only thing that frightened Suk more than the walking dead. Undaunted by the hail of sniper fire, the guilty floated toward Hung, electricity arcing from the chair to the crime boss's polearm, shocking him backward. Hung swung back, but his blows glanced off the solid chair that housed the grinning corpse. To his right, the drowned man swung his anchor at Yamaziko, catching her on the shoulder and tangling her in the rusty chain. The Torakage, racked with fear and doubt, focused his mind and remembered his training with the acolytes of the Last Blossom. Fighting back his terror, he ran forward, past the hanging corpse, and dropped off his explosives. In the center of the graveyard, Montressor finally seemed to register the presence of a rival crew. He hesitated, torn between the old woman to his left and the garish, decorated crime boss to his right, before taking 3 long steps to close the gap with the boss. Yamaziko smiled inwardly. Her enemies always assumed the man was in charge. Or maybe it was just all the shiny flags. Either way, she took the opportunity to step behind the drowned, push him aside with her yari, and move back to set the fuse on her explosive. Sensing the presence of great power, the hanged ghost floated through the mausoleum to confront Yamaziko. While her back was turned, he looped the free end of his noose around her neck and pulled. As Yamaziko fought to free herself from the dead man's collar, the Torakage saw an opportunity and sprinted back to the crypt. The last thing Yamaziko saw before she lost consciousness was her masked companion scooping up the dynamite that the hanged man had dropped, letting her limp form fall to the ground. The hanged picked up her charges and stowed them somewhere inside his rotting coat. Meanwhile, Suk cleared his mind, raised his rifle, and squeezed off one more shot at the guilty. This time his aim was true. The bullet passed through the chair, through the ghostly convict's chest, and the electricity abruptly stopped, the chair hitting the ground with a thump and falling to the side. Invigorated, the assassin moved to a new position where he could better see the conflict between Hung and the slender man with the noose. Rather than taking another shot, Suk dug into his bag and pulled out a small stone, etched with the secret sigil of the 10 Thunders, and laid it at his feet. He looked left and saw Yamaziko's body, saw the drowned moving toward him. Time was growing short. Montressor and Hung the crime boss traded blows, neither giving an inch. Hung's nagamaki cut deep, rending the Undertaker's gray flesh, while Montressor tangled Hung's limbs with his noose. The trailing end of the glowing rope grew longer and longer, appearing from nowhere to stagger the boss, nearly knocking him off his feet. In a desperate move, Hung grabbed the rope and used it to pull himself closer to his foe, embedding his blade in the tall man's chest. Montressor fell backwards, the ropes loosening. But as Hung tried to free himself, the body before him spasmed. Against all odds, Montressor stood erect, the nagamaki still protruding from his chest. Hung was frozen in terror. Could nothing kill this monstrosity? Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed the stone that Suk had dropped. Hung closed his eyes, recited the chant that Yamaziko had taught him, and disappeared from Montressor's view, the ropes falling in a limp pile at his feet. He reappeared next to Suk, 1 foot on the sigil stone. Suk looked him in the eye and whispered, "This is Thunder's territory." He took a deep breath, put the tall man in his sights, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. Time stood still. Suk and the crime boss watched as Montressor turned toward them, and where his right eye should have been, there was a gaping hole, gray-green smoke leaking out. Slowly, as though underwater, Montressor fell, first to his knees, then forward. This time, he did not rise. There would be no bodies for Seamus to harvest. For tonight, at least. This was Thunder's territory. This was the first Henchman Hardcore game we ever played. It was super fun. We thought it was going to be really restrictive because you have to choose plant explosives as your strategy and you have to choose assassinate and vendetta as your schemes. But it wound up being this amazing mano-a-mano match. It was like man defense. Everybody found their guy and fought. One of the absolute best things about this game were the cinematic moments that happened when you have so few activations and only 2 soul stones and only 4 cards in your hand. You're sort of at the mercy of fate, and some really, really fun stuff happened. For one, the last play was so much fun. When the Kachanaka sniper laid down that scheme marker, I had no idea what he was up to. And then the crime boss uses his bonus action called Thunder's Territory, where you can teleport to a friendly scheme marker. So he zips over there, and then the Kachanaka sniper was taking a shot where Montressor had cover. He managed to hit him, but he was tied, so he was -2 to the flip, and then he's hard to wound, so that was another -1. -3 to the flip. Not only did he get the trigger he needed on the hit, which was a ram to get critical, but he also flipped 3 severes and a moderate. He got moderate, which is 3 damage, +1 from the critical, which is exactly what he needed to take Montressor out. It was a jump up and down moment, and since he has Assassinate, he got fast for doing that, so he still had 2 AP, which meant he could go and either pick up or drop a scheme marker, but obviously that was the end of the story. The narrative battle report really gives you an opportunity to think about these games in terms of it being a story. I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know how you like this compared to lunch break battle reports. It's a whole different thing, but it's also very entertaining, I think. Thanks for watching. This is The Household Gamer. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all on the internet. Ciao.